The African National Congress, the party that helped liberate black South Africans from white minority rule, is reeling from historic losses in this month's local government elections. Support for the ruling party fell below 60% of votes for the first time since 1994. Voters are said to be upset about high unemployment and corruption scandals surrounding President Jacob Zuma. We begin our coverage with CCTV's Yolisa and Njamela from Johannesburg. And Yolisa, the ANC still leads nationally with something like 54% of the vote, but suffered losses across the country. Tell us about some of those big losses and how has the party and President Zuma responded?
Well, the three key metros were cancelled that many political parties, if not all, were gunning for in this country, and namely the Nelson Mandela Bay, which is named after the former president and humanitarian Nelson Mandela himself. And of course, he was the former president of the ANC. The second one being Tshwane, where capital Pretoria is at. And the third one, Johannesburg, which is really the economic hub of the rest of the African continent. The ANC lost all those metros or cancelled. The opposition parties didn't win outright, of course, as well, but they gained the large share of the votes. And currently we're dealing with an issue of all political parties frantically involved in coalition engagement, discussions. They want to partner up after these local general elections. But what I can tell you in terms of how the ANC has responded, they're extremely disappointed. But they do not believe still that this is a referendum by South Africans on President Zuma himself, but largely they've gone underground, not wanting any officials to deal with the media until after the meeting that they are holding this weekend from tonight. I spoke to the ANC spokesperson a few hours before I came through here to the studio, Zizi Kodwa, who told me that the National Executive Committee meeting is underway from tonight, and that's where they will be deliberating about these local government elections and the outcome, and they will speak to the media right afterwards.
Now, what were the major issues for voters that drove this election?
The major issues are really unemployment, poverty, and inequality. And also the fact that many observers, especially political analysts, were saying it is, in fact, a vote no against the president, President Jacob Zuma, because he's involved with many scandals, he's attached to many scandals. Everything that people are complaining about, except for the three major issues that I've mentioned, surrounds President Jacob Zuma. You remember, earlier this year, in fact in March, the highest court in this country, the Constitutional Court, ruled that President Jacob Zuma had in fact violated the Constitution, and that had to do with his private residency, Nkandla, whereby he used tax money to renovate his huge house. So as is, it would seem like the ANC is really frustrated, but they don't really want to let on.
Now, South Africa has a general election coming up in about 3 years, in 2019. Do you think the results that we've just seen could be an indicator of what could happen in that election?
Oh, absolutely. Since 2009, when President Jacob Zuma took over the presidency here in South Africa, the ANC has been declining in numbers. They've been receiving less and less percentage in terms of vote. In 2017, the ANC is holding their national conference. This is where they will be electing new leaders. Observers and political analysts again saying it would be best if the ANC removes the head. Should they move Zuma, it's all likely that ANC will gain yet again many votes, but if they don't, they're running the risk of losing quite a lot in these elections.
Thanks, Yolisa. That's CCTV's Yolisa and Njamela reporting from Johannesburg. For more on the election results and what they mean for South Africa, we've put together a distinguished panel. Joining us from Johannesburg via Skype is Habib. He's the Vice-Chancellor and Principal at the University of Witwatersrand. Also from Johannesburg is Pusch Commey. He's a barrister of the High Court of South Africa and the Associate Editor of New African magazine. Thanks to both of you for joining us. Adam, let me start with you. Put this election in some kind of perspective for us. We have the ANC, the African National Congress, the party of Nelson Mandela, which remains the dominant party in South Africa, but it's suffered huge losses at the ballot box. How big a loss is this for the party?
So I think it's a significant loss. I think this elections has been a game changer. What you've essentially had is that the ANC has fallen from about 62% at the national level to about 53, 54%. On a national level, it's lost in every single province except KwaZulu-Natal. and it is below 50% in most of the major urban metropoles. So Johannesburg, Tshwane, Nelson Mandela. It had already lost Cape Town a long time ago, and basically the DA consolidated its hold. And in one or two others, Ekululeni, definitely one or two others. So effectively, for the first time, the ANC seems vulnerable. And that is why it's such a game changer. It's shaken up the party, and it's shaken up the political system in quite dramatic ways.
Pusch Commey, what is your view on this? These were local elections, elections for municipalities, town councils, city governments. But how do they change the national political landscape of South Africa?
It does in a very significant way, because there's always the danger of that loss becoming irreversible. And it's been some time coming, especially due to, so many incidents of alleged corruption, poor service delivery, and the country has had several of such service delivery, protests, strikes, complaints, of patronage and as I've already mentioned, corruption. For instance, the economic freedom fighters, looking like a splinter group of the ANC, its former youth league now in opposition. It was inevitable that part of its support will be ripped off. And then beyond that is also the DA reinventing itself. Appointing a black leader, Musi Maimani, who speaks the language of the black vote that they were targeting. So with all that in combination, it was inevitable that something was going to give, and that's the result that we see today.
You both referred to the DA, that's the Democratic Alliance, the opposition party in South Africa. But Adam, let's get back to the ANC. As you pointed out, a significant loss in the popular vote, reducing its majority there. How did it lose its way? Why are voters so unhappy with the ANC?
Well, I think that what has been said is that effectively it's long in the making. Corruption has been a big issue for a number of years. Service delivery protests have been a major issue in the society. The political elite has, if you like, not been seen to be accountable to the citizens for some years now. I might suggest that this is the 4th election under Jacob Zuma. And effectively, we've lost. The ANC has reduced its vote in every single election for the last 4. So there's a trend here. And actually, if the ANC does not arrest the trend, then it is in serious trouble. I think the one other additional point to be made is that it's going to have significant consequences at a national level. Even though this was a local government election, firstly, it's been a referendum of the president himself. And whatever the decision, whatever the loss is, the big question is who's going to become, which faction within the ANC is going to take precedence. If the president moves quickly and disbands the modernist wing of the ANC, largely located in places like Johannesburg, etc., then he'll simply strengthen himself and undermine the party even further. If, on the other hand, the modernist wing were to move quicker, and if they were to succeed in getting rid of the president, then effectively you would have a fundamental shift in the leadership of the party, and then even perhaps in the policy of the ANC over the next couple of years. And that's the battle that has been unleashed, if you like, by these local government elections. So yes, it was about local government, but its consequences are going to be felt at a national level. And it could determine the politics of the ANC and therefore the country for the next 10, 15 years.
But from what you're telling us, Adam, the broader picture here is that there appears to be a split within the ANC.
Oh, there's absolutely a split within the ANC. Until now, that split has been papered over by all kinds of patronage and other relationships. What this election has done is it's accentuated those divisions and basically has made it a situation where each one of those factions no longer can succeed and imagine the ANC continuing with the existence of the other. So it's forced them into a zero-sum game, and that's where the real challenge lies in the coming weeks and months.
Pusch Commey, the main beneficiaries of the ANC loss is the DA, the Democratic Alliance, the opposition party. Who is the DA? What do they stand for? And are they a viable alternative to the ANC?
The DA has a bit of a problem in that they're seen as the successes of what they say here, white privilege. Successes of the what was seen or that was wrong with apartheid. That's quite unfair, but it's seen as a white liberal party, which is making a pitch for power. So they have their base, and to some extent, that is true in that their base is mostly white voters. So they have a consolidation of that base, and then from there, then they try to fan out to attract black voters. Conversely, it's the same with the ANC. ANC's majority support is black voters, and they don't get a lot of votes from white voters. So the DA has reinvented itself. They've tried to broaden their base, to be more representative of the country as a whole, to be seen as a non-racial party. And from there, they try to chip away at the ANC's support in the black vote, because with 80%, with the South Africa being 80% black, you're not going to come into power without the black vote.
Adam, Mmusi Maimane is the leader of the Democratic Alliance, the opposition party. This is what he had to say after the election. Let's watch.
Now they can sit back and understand that they can't just go out to voters and tell them, because you are black, you must vote for us. They can't go to voters and say, we will govern, as they've said, until Jesus comes back. I think now they recognize that they must, in fact, the debate for the people of South Africa is about governance models. And the ANC can't just sustain the argument that says to them, they will always just have South African electorate just because they are the ANC.
So Adam, Mmusi Maimane is pointing to a major shift there in black voting patterns. He is saying that black voters used to vote for the ANC out of party loyalty because they saw it as the party of liberation. But 22 years after the first democratic election, is that honeymoon now over? Are black voters now voting with their heads rather than their hearts?
So I think it's much more complex than Mmusi suggests. I think that he's absolutely right that the ANC can no longer take their voters for granted. I think that's absolutely right. But I don't think that there are the shifts in black voting patterns as people have suggested. So let me give you the numbers. In real terms, the DA has not grown substantively much in the actual townships. It's grown by a percentage or two, maybe even 3 in some contexts. But there hasn't been a dramatic shift amongst African voters in townships to the DA. Not in the scale that would be required. What effectively happened is they turned out their voters in white and colored suburbs and in Indian suburbs, perhaps even in certain middle-class suburbs, African suburbs. But what effectively has happened is the ANC vote didn't come out to vote. People in the townships refused to go to vote. They stayed away from the polls, and the extenuated voter turnout in DA areas and the actual numbers of people who didn't turn out in ANC areas is essentially created the result that has happened. Secondly, on the EFF, although it has been said that they've simply grown from 6 to 8%. That's worth bearing in mind. And yes, they have grown in the voting pool of the ANC, but that's not a dramatic increase by any means. 6 to 8%. 8% is not a dramatic number. They anticipated at least double digits. They did not get those votes. And so I'm not as optimistic, as if you like, as others have been about the EFF vote. I think it's increased. I think it's likely to increase. Its significance is the fact that it's growing in the ANC base. But it is by no means anywhere that can force the ANC to make the concessions that it needs to do. Here's the big 2 issues that I think are worth bearing in mind. First, younger voters are beginning to look at the DA and the EFF far more than they've done before. African younger voters. And I think that in the long term, that plays in both the DA's favor and perhaps even in the EFF's favor. The second is, even though younger voters are prepared to vote, what the DA has done previously is it's taken the city of Cape Town through a coalition agreement, engaged in good governance, and on the basis of good governance, increased its support base in the city of Cape Town. So it moved from 46 in 2006 to effectively 66% in the city of Cape Town, 67% in the city of Cape Town in 2016. Now that's a phenomenal increase. And if we can replicate that experience in, let's say, Johannesburg, Tshwane, Nelson Mandela, etc., then it's on a very, very different ticket. And so the real significance of this elections is not so much in the numbers that they've received, but in the trends that are evident, and whether they can replicate the trends nationally